This tragedy is what finally drove Miko to embark on his journey to discover Palestine. And today he's sitting with me here today in Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., in Dar al Hurriya, Palestine, House of Freedom, in which you started and you organized. And I'm so curious, man, how you went from the grandson of one of the people that signed the Declaration of Israel's independence, Israel's generals, and today leading the House of Freedom in Palestine in Washington, D.C. First of all, thank you and welcome for joining the
Of
Unsaudi
course,
podcast.
sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Well, it's a long story, and that's why there's a book, The General Son, which describes the journey. It's called The General Son: Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. So the book has the full story. But the short version is I began meeting Palestinians. So I was born and raised in Jerusalem, and they like to call Jerusalem a mixed city, but it's not a mixed city. It's a completely segregated city, not unlike all of Palestine. I mean, the apartheid regime created a segregation between Israelis and Palestinians, complete segregation. So even growing up in the same city, you don't meet Palestinians. I mean, you live a completely different reality than they do. And then, like you mentioned, as a result of the tragedy that my family had gone through, I realized that there's a piece missing in the puzzle in terms of what I knew and understood about that country, which at that time I still called it Israel, and that realization drove me to start engaging with Palestinians and meeting Palestinians and seeking out opportunities to meet Palestinians, because why would anybody, three young men kill themselves and in such a tragic way and so on. And so it drove me to try to understand what kind of a reality was created for Palestinians by the fact that the apartheid regime was there and pretended to be a legitimate state. So I started, actually here in the United States, the chapter that talks about the journey in the book starts with the line, something along the line, my journey to meet Palestinians began in the United States. So that was the first time I met Palestinians, sitting around and talking like humans, like, normal people. And so then when I traveled back and forth to Palestine all the time, and then I started engaging with Palestinians and traveling into Palestinian cities, both within 1948 and all parts of Palestine, basically. And that what eventually got me to the point where I understood what is going on and what this horrible tragedy of the apartheid regime created in Palestine and for Palestinians. And so it went from being what I was taught, which is the creation of this regime was heroic and was connected to Jewish history and had all this, mythology built around it, to rejecting it because realizing what it really was, what it was meant to do and what it really did. And of course, there's a history of almost 100 years now in Palestine of this regime, and we know what it's done. So basically, that's the short version of the story of the journey.
Why, though, did you decide to learn about the Palestinians rather than choose to hate them? I mean, if your sister's child gets killed, a normal person's reaction would be to feel anger and hatred towards the Palestinians.
Well, anger and frustration for sure, but it wasn't pointed at Palestinians. It was pointed at the root cause of the violence, which is the apartheid regime, which is the Israeli government. And in fact, my sister. So when this happened, it was big news over there. I flew to Jerusalem and spent the time with my family and so on, the funeral. And it was big news. It was front page news that the granddaughter of, so and so was killed in a suicide bombing and so on. And so right off the bat, and journalists were everywhere and from all over the world. And so right off the bat, my sister said two things. Number one, she said, "Don't talk to me about revenge, because killing more people in response to the death of a child is completely madness. It's completely insane. It makes no sense." And number two, she said that she holds the government, the Israeli government, responsible for her daughter's death. And so there's no such thing as the Palestinians, right? Three young men did this and killed themselves. And so if you want to understand the root cause of something, you have to look and find out what is the source of the violence, what can cause people to do something so tragic. So obviously the fingers are pointed at, and what's interesting is Netanyahu was prime minister then too. He was prime minister for a while and then came back. So to me, that made the most sense, is to engage and find out what kind of reality exists on that other side that would bring somebody to do something like this.
Why then don't most Israelis think this way? I mean, they do see the Palestinians as they, and way worse than they. They see them as less than animals. Why don't they see it like this as well?
That's a question that is it's a very good question. I can't explain it. I mean, I had undergone the same kind of education as all Israelis, where Palestinians are either non-existent, or they're terrorists, or they're backward refugees, and I mean they don't really exist. We see them, they go in and out of the frame as construction workers or doing the landscaping, but we never meet the Palestinians. And then at 18, you're suddenly told that they're the enemy and we have to protect ourselves against them. But
I thought they indoctrinated you as a child to hating the Palestinians.
Well,
in
it's not
Israel.
it's not a question of hating. It's a question that they don't exist, and when they do exist, they're a threat to our survival. They're an existential threat to our survival. So it's worse than hate. Now there's a lot of hate being expressed as well, but I never sensed that that hate was the issue, the threat was the issue, fear was the issue, and so that was the driving force. And so why are Israelis, acting in this psychotic way as a society? That's something that people are going to have to study in the future to figure out how they were able to, how this education system that was put in place, by the way, long before the state was established. I mean, my parents were born in Palestine in the 1920s, and there was already a Zionist education system from pre-K. Yeah, so they went to school from pre-K through university. There was an entire education system already in place, and so I would venture to say, number one, it's a success of the education system, that it created exactly the kind of people that they needed, that they wanted to execute the plan. And number two, as a member of society, this is what you hear, this is what you see, this is what you learn, this is what you hear other people say. And so that's what you are, that's what you become. I mean, it's very powerful, and it's a small country. I always compare Israeli society to German society during the Nazi regime. This is something that people don't talk about, but there was a very significant resistance, German resistance to the Nazis. And they were all sent to concentration camps and killed immediately and executed. Nobody ever talks about that, the German resistance to the Nazis. There were small groups, larger groups, there were individuals. That doesn't exist. There's no Israeli resistance to Zionism. There is no resistance against Zionism. And I think one day somebody will have to study these and maybe compare these two societies to figure out how one has been so successfully indoctrinated to be violent and cruel to the other, whereas in Germany, even with the indoctrination and even with the violence and with the threat of violence, in other words, Germans who resisted knew what their fate would be when they were caught, and they were all caught. If Israelis, stood up and marched and spoke against it, they wouldn't be killed. They wouldn't be sent to a concentration camp. And yet they don't do it. There is no threat. So I don't know. You'd have to, I'm not a sociologist, but that's the reality.
Have you ever spoken to your grandfather about Israeli
No,
society?
he passed away before I was born.
Oh, he passed away before you were born. How about your father?
My father passed away before I became involved in this issue. He passed away 2 years before my niece was killed. Oh. So, I mean, I knew his thoughts and so forth. We were kind of a liberal Zionist family. He talked about the two-state solution and that sort of thing. He became very well known for that, and he also became an outcast because of that. Because immediately after the 1967 war, although more than a war, it was just a brutal assault by the apartheid regime against its neighbors. I mean, it was not called for, and it ended in 5 days. He immediately said, now we need to let the Palestinians establish a state in the West Bank and Gaza and make peace and move on. But immediately the establishments started building cities and towns for Jews, Israeli Jews only, throughout the West Bank and the newly occupied territories. And he kind of became an outcast, and that was his path. The two-state solution was kind of his path. He met with Yasser Arafat. I mean, he was very much involved in this. But I never spoke to him as somebody who is involved in this the way I am now, because he had already gone.
What do you think his reaction would be to what you've done since?
Well, I think, I think that he would support the idea of dismantling the apartheid regime and establishing a democracy with equal rights. And the reason I think that, I mean, he was a Zionist to his dying day. He believed in Zionism firmly, but he was also a forward thinker. I mean, today people still talk about the two-state solution as though it's a legitimate kind of idea. Back in the day when he talked about it, nobody wanted to talk to him. so he foresaw that this was something, when people didn't want to talk about it, he was already talking about it. So my sense is that he would probably be, again, on the sidelines saying the kinds of things that we're saying here, that only a dismantling of the apartheid regime, only the liberation of Palestine and the right of return and the establishing of free democratic Palestine is the only option that really benefits everyone who lives in historic Palestine today.
A one-state solution where it becomes Palestine again, where Muslims, Christians, Jews all live together, Hindus, atheists, just like it used to be.
Well, not a lot of Hindus there, but yeah. Basically, the one state is there. All of Palestine is one state.
Right.
It was that way since 1967. Done. It was over. But of course, it's an apartheid regime. So yeah, so dismantling the apartheid regime and allowing a real free democratic Palestine to take its place.
How come no one talks about a one-state solution? I think that's the only solution there is. I believe Imam Tom Ficini, I don't know if you've heard of him, he talked about how there's like 4 outcomes to colonization: the Algerian French outcome, where the colonized kick out the colonizer; the American Indian outcome or Native American outcome, where the colonizer wins and completely genocides; and then the South African outcome, where it becomes one state. He said there's never, I think it's only 3 then. He said there's never been a 4th solution where you make this 2-state and all this mumbo jumbo, this crap.
Well, the 2-state is what they tried to do with the Native Americans here. And of course, we know how well that goes. So that went. But I don't think that nobody talks. A lot of people talk about it. I mean, this was the initial platform of the PLO, of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was a democracy, a single democracy with equal rights. This was their initial platform, and gradually they were pressured into accepting the 2-state solution, recognizing the apartheid regime as a legitimate state, and so on. But this has been the Palestinian platform. And today, I don't know. I mean, I have many friends and comrades, Palestinian activists, grassroots leaders in Palestine. Many of them are part of Dar al-Hurriya. They've given their name to it. We all agree. We all talk about this. Nobody talks about anything but that.
The one-state solution. It's the only. It's only the only political.
That there is, yeah. I mean, the only people who talk about 2 states are either people who know that it's an impossibility, and they also know that talking about it allows the apartheid regime to kill more Palestinians and take over more Palestinian land. Because as long as you talk about it, it pretends like you want peace. Or other people that talk about it, and I meet many of those people at the Capitol when I meet people there, they don't know what other possibility. In other words, they haven't heard of other possibilities, and they're wondering, well, how's that going to work? So one of the things that we do with our outreach program, we as in Palestine House of Freedom, is to demonstrate that first of all, there can be no 2 states. There's no West Bank, really. I mean, the idea that there's a West Bank is a myth. There's no West Bank. It's been completely integrated into the rest of the country, to the rest of the kind of the Zionist state, and so we need to come to terms with that. It's been, they talk about, will they annex? Will they not annex? They've annexed it a long time ago, But so to demonstrate that not only is that not a solution that is possible, but there is a better solution which will benefit everyone who lives, like I said, in historic Palestine, and that is dismantling the apartheid state. Because this vision of Israelis and Palestinians living in peace, coexisting, it can happen. I think it's realistic, but it's not going to happen as long as it's an apartheid regime that is in control of Palestine. A real liberated Palestine with equal rights, with the right of return, will allow that to happen. Nothing else will allow that to happen. So that's really the outreach. That's what we focus on when we talk to people. So they understand that there is a solution. We're just not working to get there. I mean, we are, but the halls of power, they haven't quite come to terms with that.
Yeah.
But I believe they will, and sooner than most people think.
I think anyone within the Palestinian movement that's pretty much ignorant about what we're talking about, how the 2-state solution is actually killing Palestinians, should know that we should really focus in on this 1-state solution because it's politically powerful. It's telling us, why don't we all just live together as one, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, all together, and like how we used to. That's way more powerful than give us our own land, give us our own property, get out of the West Bank, get out of Gaza. That all of that tit for tat's not going to really work. We just need one message of peace, one state. I believe, I think it was, I forget his name, something Harai, or he's like a Jewish thinker. He was saying if the Palestinian movement starts asking for a South African solution, Israeli government is in trouble. The Zionist state is in trouble, which I believe is true.
Yeah.
Yuval Harari.
Right now, there's no real representation for the Palestinian. Really, there's no real Palestinian representatives anywhere, other than in Palestine and the grassroots activists that are there. But I mean, like as a central authority. But the South African model is the model that people around, that I talk to, that we work with, that's the model that we talk about. When you look back at the encampments that took place all across the country, that was what people talked about. And then the People's Forum for Palestine, which followed the encampments, it already happened twice. It's 2 years in a row already. That's the only thing people talk about. So it's growing, and people are understanding that that is the only way forward. It just hasn't reached the halls of power. There's no critical mass yet, and there's no understanding in the halls of power that if anybody does care about the well-being of all people who live in Palestine, then there's a very clear path to that. And the South Africans, they laid out a very good model. They laid out a very good roadmap.
I often get asked about how to build a business, and I found most people choose between two things. They either choose a slow, small, side income hustle idea that never really amounts to anything, or they hop on a trend or fad that ends up collapsing in a couple months. But how do you really build a business? And that's where I met the Ayubi Collective. Now, the Ayubi Collective was originally a private, closed group of 7, 8, 9-figure Muslim millionaires who built multi-million-dollar businesses. When I hopped on a call with these guys, I actually got emotional talking to them because they were giving me advice that I really needed in the stage of the business that I was in. They're now offering a mentorship program alongside their step-by-step training course where they show you the exact methods and tools they use to build their multi-million-dollar businesses. So if you're looking for something profitable, halal, scalable, and guidance along the way, then go to link.ayubi.com/Ansari. We're going to put it in our bio. link.ayubi.com/Ansari. Join the Ayubi Collective and find your next business venture. Provision Capital is a Sharia-compliant real estate firm built on trust, scale, and purpose, with investments in residential real estate all across the United States, and their focus is ethical investing. Provision Capital has a historical annual track record for the past 10 to 15 years. Visit provisioncapital.com and join over 400 investors nationwide to begin ethically investing your money today. Invest in Provision Capital today and invest in an ethical future. Professor John Mearsheimer from University of Chicago, he said that we've never seen anything like the Zionist Israeli Jews. We've never seen a democratic genocide. He said you can even make some excuse for the Nazis, and that the people, like you said, majority may have not even known, may have heard whispers, never actually seen it or felt it or even smelled it. He said you can even make an excuse for ISIS in that it doesn't smile while killing the people that they kill or beheading the people that they behead. They're not smiling. At least they look angry. He said we've never seen a people collectively enjoy death, enjoy murder, enjoy killing. This is from John Mearsheimer. I'm kind of quoting him, but this is basically what he said. What do you think is going on there? I know you kind of touched on it earlier.
Look, I mean, I don't think they invented anything new. I mean, apartheid has been, but what's perhaps is new, and I agree, is the popular support for the genocide. Now, you have to understand, people say, oh, the Israeli society has gone far to the right, they're so much more extreme. That's not true. If you look at what the founders of Zionism said, what the founders of the regime in 1948 said, what every Israeli politician has said for the last 100 years, what is happening now is a direct line. There has been no shift. The attempt and the desire to get rid of Palestinians, to commit genocide, to commit ethnic cleansing, that is the very foundation of the regime, of this so-called State of Israel. That was the foundation. Between 1947 and 1949, there was a massive campaign. Almost 1 million people were thrown out. God only knows how many were massacred. Villages were burned and destroyed, and everything was stolen. Cities were stolen. Towns were stolen. Produce in the fields was stolen. Cars, money that people had in the banks. I mean, Palestine was a developed country. All that was stolen. And that was the foundation, and that is the moment that Israelis feel very proud of. In other words, the identity of Israelis is directly tied to that crime, which they describe as an act of heroism. So there's nothing new here. This is exactly, and Israeli society, people knew about the Nakba. They knew about what happened in those years. Hell, they participated. Their parents participated, but they managed to convey it in a way that gave you a sense of pride. We were the few, they were the many. They wanted to kill us. We just wanted to live. We had a right to come back because we were nationless. The Jewish people and all that, which is all mythology. So that is the very foundation of Israeli society. So the genocide that we're seeing now is really just a heightened expression of genocide, of what we've seen since the very beginning over the last, I would say, 100 years in Palestine.
We now see Israeli soldiers wearing Greater Israel patches on their arms. And Netanyahu and most of Israeli society has been talking about this concept of Greater Israel for a while now. And at the same time, today's March 18th that we're filming this on Thursday, where I think the Prime Minister of Qatar just came out and said that they're losing patience for the Iranians, right? As we know, the Iran war is happening right now. And I'm wondering, do the Arabs not see what's happening? Will the Arabs actually get fooled into getting into this war and fighting Iran, losing its resources, losing its oil infrastructure? Because Iran's definitely going to bomb all of their oil refineries, which will completely collapse their economies. Iran will also bomb their water salination, whatever that word.
Salination. Of course, they already did. Yeah.
They already. I think they did it in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
But they're going to continue to do so, which will render the societies unlivable uncivilized. These Arab nations. The only winner of that would be Israel, because Arab nations will all be destroyed. Iran will be destroyed in the meantime, because Israel will use those foot soldiers, these Arab foot soldiers, the American foot soldiers, to try to get into Iran. Doesn't matter to them that they're in the meat grinder. And then Israel can then move on to project its power and create Greater Israel. It's already moving into southern Lebanon. It's already thinking ahead about Turkey. I mean, do these Arab leaders not see this?
No, they see it. But, there's two answers to that. One is that the regimes that govern the Arab states are obviously not democratic regimes. And so they are beholden to the United States and to the apartheid, the Zionist state, of course, sadly. And they've been
working to it how?
Well, they've been working together for a long time. These regimes rely on the United States for security. They rely on the apartheid state for security, for all kinds of things, to protect their regimes. Now, the other part of it is, if you are a leader of an Arab country today and you look around you, what do you see? You see two options. You see the option that they took in Iraq and in Syria and in Libya and in Yemen, which was a solidly pro-Palestinian stance. And look at these countries now. So is that a good choice for your country as the leader of that country? Or do you need to find a way to walk the fine line and survive and make sure that your country isn't blasted off the face of the earth and chaos created and so on, which is what happens, of course, in all these countries that I mentioned. So I think it's unfair to judge the Arab states. I judge the Europeans, because the Europeans and the Americans are the ones who are supporting this, and they're the ones who can stop it, and they choose not to. The Arab states are between a rock and a hard place. The Europeans are paying and supporting for the genocide of the Palestinian people, and of course America, the United States. And so I think that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. And now look, their defenses were taken away to help the apartheid state against the retaliation by Iran, and they're defenseless. And they're pretty small anyway, so they're defenseless anyway. They rely on the United States to defend them. And the United States is not a reliable ally. We know that. So that's the reality in which they exist. And so it's not that they don't see it. The question is, strategically, if your responsibility is to defend your own country, how do you want to end up?
I mean, the United States is also between a rock and a hard place, because the most peculiar thing happened this week, where Trump is allowing Russian oil. He has removed sanctions off of Russian oil, which is allowing Russia's economy to be funded to continue the war in Ukraine, which is another proxy war between the United States and Ukraine. And then it's also allowing Iranian ships through the Strait of Hormuz to sell to India and China and the rest of the world, to make sure that oil prices stay $100 or less. That's the litmus test that Trump is going on, $100 or less. So he's letting Iran make money, he's letting Russia make money, and he's having the United States and Israel and the Europeans lose money. And all of this for a war in Israel a war in Iran that we don't even necessarily need. As you and I have seen this week, John Kent, the Secretary of National Security for Counterterrorism, director, has just resigned and gave out this letter basically saying, I did so because we're fighting a war in Iran for Israel. Now, obviously, all the Zionists are attacking him, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, and the rest. He immediately went on the Tucker Carlson show and laid out everything. I mean, I don't know if you watched that episode.
I didn't see the Tucker Carlson, but I read the letter, and of course he's going to be attacked. this whole mad reality was created by the United States and its support for the apartheid regime. I mean, the sanctions against Russia don't make any sense. The advance of NATO towards Russia, moving east, which the Russians were promised would not happen when Germany was united, happened. So in other words, this war was forced on the world by the United States. Of course, the attack in Iran makes no sense to anyone. It makes no sense to anyone. I mean, there's no reason on earth other than elections coming up here, elections coming up over there, and this mad society, which is the Israeli society. So none of this has any bearing in reality. None of this has any bearing in reason. It's complete madness, and it's an expression of an empire that is about to disintegrate. It's about to disintegrate, and now all they have to show that they're strong is the ability to destroy everything around them, like this war, like the genocide in Gaza, and so on. So, looking for reason, looking for kind of an intellectual understanding of something that is madness, it doesn't work. I mean, you can't understand madness. That's why it's called madness. You know.
I mean, and I don't want to infer, but I think several ex-intelligence people from the intelligence community in America, FBI, CIA. Do you think that within American intelligence, I mean, I've heard reports that the U.S. military was against this. The U.S. military establishment was fighting the Trump administration not to start this war. Do you think that slowly the American military apparatus and the intelligence apparatus is turning against this war?
Well, who knows? I mean, we don't hear about that in the news, but Trump fires anybody who doesn't agree with him. So, you know what I mean? If somebody disagrees, he got rid of him. That's how things like this operate, and that's why things like this fail, because they're done for reasons that don't make any sense. So, of course, if you're a military expert and you see this madness, you either warn, or quit, or remain complicit. Those are the three choices, right? And different people made different choices. Same with the intelligence community. All the whistleblowers that we know, people like John Kiriakou and Ray McGovern, two generations, and many others that resign, and they resign because they say, well, we don't want to be complicit, and we're not heard, and this is madness, and we can't be part of it. So that's what's happening. And again, the war is, I mean, this vicious attack against Iran is full blown. America can't win it. Only Iran can win this, because America, in order to win, has to, I don't know what win looks like, but there's no way America can win this. The United States can win this. Iran just has to survive to win, and to hurt the United States, and to hurt targets, Zionist targets within Palestine. And they're doing that very effectively. So once again, I don't think, if you have a healthy mind, you're supposed to understand madness. You can't understand madness. It's madness. That's why it's called that. And that's what we're seeing right now. And again, I'll say, it seems to me that this is the end of an era. It's this imperial power, it's this racist ideology that realize that they're crumbling, and this is their last hurrah. This is kind of like the fireworks, if you will, before the end. There's no legitimacy to any of it.
There's a CIA analyst, I forget his name, that recently said he doesn't see Israel coming out of this. That he doesn't see Israel existing in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. There's no way there's no way they can win this. There's no way they can win this. I mean, they're being hit so hard. Of course, we're not hearing news of exactly where things are, what targets are being hit and so forth, because there's a complete blackout. If you look at the Hebrew news, there's not a single word about anything being hit. Nothing. Only about the successes, quote unquote, of their military in Iran, and killing people in Iran, and eliminating people in Iran, and all that kind of jargon. But there's no way that it can win. There's no way that they come out of this even remotely in a better place that they were. And I agree. I think this is the end of this. This is kind of the last few breaths of this regime.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Israel's not going to come out of this. It's not going to exist in the next 5 to 10 years.
Every soul was created with purpose, and every believer was given a chance to act. You may not see it now, but your giving could be someone's lifeline, a child's next meal, a widow's rent, a family's clean water. Humanity believes this ummah was made to carry each other. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever helps ease one in difficulty, Allah will make it easy for him in this world and the hereafter. That's why humanity was built, to bring back the spirit of rahmah, of mercy, that defined this ummah from the very beginning. Not just aid, but solutions. Solar-powered water systems, direct zakat funds delivered to the hands of those who need it, orphans given a chance to learn, to grow, and lead. This is not your average nonprofit. They removed the red tape. They've reimagined charity from the ground up with transparency, trust, and ihsan. Humanity is a registered US and Canadian charity with a 100% zakat policy. They work with trusted partners, including UN agencies, to ensure your donation is safe, accountable, and impactful. But more than that, they are a movement, a global wave of believers who see suffering and say, I will do something. So if you believe in mercy, if you believe in change, if you want your sadaqah and zakat to leave a mark on the world, this is your moment. And this is humanity. Go to wearehumanity.org and give today and make your mark.
I think one of the things that allows me to understand their motives is when we see what the Secretary of War, as he likes to call himself, Pete Hegseth, says that he's a crusader, right? He puts, he has kafir on his arm, which means disbeliever, which is not something to be proud of. And it doesn't mean goyim in any way or anything like that. And then also Netanyahu, like if you study history, you have to understand that madmen of the past have always had a dream, have always had a self-image, an imagination in their head of who they will become, and it's always some great destiny.
I mean, I don't know. He sees himself as this great leader, I'm sure, but he is also just a power-hungry human being, a power-hungry politician, and he knows how to stay in power better than any other politician there, and so that's why he's still in power. And again, his extreme compared to what? He is not any different than all the other Israeli prime ministers in terms of ideology. In terms of rhetoric, maybe a little bit. But if you look back and you listen to what Zionist leaders have said from the beginning, he is no different. Just right now, we see it in front of our eyes. Imagine if, Nakba 1948, people had seen, or during the Holocaust, people had seen this live, how would they have responded, right? So it's a very different time. But in terms of ideology, in terms of, if you look at the makeup of the political figures within the Knesset, the parliament, the Zionist parliament, there is no dissent to what is happening. Not to the war, not to the attack in Iran, not to the genocide in Gaza, not to the ethnic cleansing in other parts of Palestine. They're all on the same page. So if there was a different prime minister, which I doubt we'll see anytime soon, but even if there was, that would change nothing. It would change nothing. Maybe the rhetoric might be a little different, but it would change nothing. They've taken, like you said, they've taken parts of Lebanon. They're probably going to keep the Litani as the northern boundary, which is something they've wanted for a very long time. They've taken parts of Syria that very likely they're going to keep. I don't believe they will go east of the Jordan River because the Kingdom of Jordan is a very stable ally. And so I don't think they're going to do that, although a lot of them believe that they deserve it, that they should.
It's a part of Greater Israel.
It's part of Greater Israel, but it's not part of the consensus.
Right.
It's not part of the consensus. And so, and also, like I said, his ideological upbringing goes way long before his brother was killed and became a hero. I mean, his brother was a hero before he died too, but considered a hero.
I mean, I think it's often interesting how religious extremists aren't usually religious. Like, if you look at ISIS members, a lot of them don't even know anything about Islam. Yeah. So I think it could be true that he's not religious and that he has a religious extremist view of the world at the same time.
It's not religious. It's nationalistic and racist and violent. You know what I mean? I think it degrades religion when we say that that this is religion. You know, I mean,
But do you think it would help the Palestinian movement or Arab countries, or I think Iran is already on this wave, to understand that there's something spiritual happening here? When you look at the Epstein class and their sacrifices to these demonic elements, when you look at, this idea of Greater Israel and creating the new Judea Samara or whatever, right? And that the many generals were telling American soldiers that this is a crusade, that this is a religious war on the ground.
Yeah.
Shouldn't then we start talking about this in a more spiritual way, like understanding, okay, well, it might be madness or it might be illogical, but it might be coming from somewhere that's not necessarily about the mind. It's more about the spirit, that they see themselves and they see Iran as Amalek, and they see.
But how would you fight it differently? At the end of the day, you have to get rid of it, and so giving it a spiritual, or seeing it as a spiritual expression makes no sense because there's nothing spiritual about it. It's completely it's violence, it's racism, it's cruelty, and you know, a lot of these things that people think are a lot of symbols that people think are religious, Jewish, they're not. They're secular, nationalistic, Zionist symbols, and one of them is Al-Aqsa. So in 1960, so in 1967, when the military took East Jerusalem, the commander, who later became the Army Chief of Staff, but the commander was a completely secular Israeli, you know, stood up and said, the Temple Mount is in our hands. And that became iconic. Every Israeli knows that sentence. Everyone knows that sentence. It became iconic. Now, I grew up secular. Most Israelis grew up secular. Why would they care about the Temple Mount? It's a national symbol. Building the temple is an expression of our national aspirations as Zionists. So it's not a religious thing. The state of Israel, the Ministry of Education, sponsors education programs that teach young people how to serve in the temple. The temple is not there, right? I remember singing as a child songs about, you know, how we're going to rebuild the temple. And I think back, I go, why were we singing that? What do we care about the temple? We're almost atheists or certainly non-religious Zionists. I mean, what's that got to do with anything? It's a national, it's an expression of the Zionist desire for, you know, its own glory. And speaking of Al-Aqsa, as you know, during Ramadan, most of Ramadan, there was no access to Muslims to pray, and it's empty. I mean, the entire ground is empty. I've been there many times. It's an incredible place. I think it's more incredible, more beautiful, certainly more significant than the Taj Mahal or Notre Dame in Paris or the Vatican. I mean, it's older, it's more beautiful, it's got a much longer history, of course. But why has it been empty so long? If we look at the pattern, the Zionist pattern, when they want to take something, the first thing they do is they make sure Palestinians are excluded from entering the space. The next thing they do is whatever they want to do with the space, which is usually to build something for themselves. I remember being there in 2021. There was a huge uprising in 2021 and a national and a strike throughout all of Palestine. And at one point, some of the brush, some of the vegetation around Al-Aqsa in the compound caught fire. And the Al-Buraq, you know, the western wall is just below it. And you saw all these young Zionists dancing and, you know, with their flags and everything. And at the top, you saw the Golden Dome and a fire. And I thought, this is it. This is it. This is what they want. They want the place to catch fire and disappear. Or maybe a missile falls. And I've been saying this, especially I've been saying this in when I speak in front of Muslim audiences. This place, if we don't act, if somebody doesn't intervene, will be destroyed. It will be destroyed. And when it is, it'll never come back. It is such a significant place for religious reasons, of course. I mean, for Muslims, of course. The history of it, how old it is, the architecture, the beauty. I mean, there's so many things culturally that go into that place that by far exceed any other of the great monuments around the world. And I've seen so many of them. And they want to ruin it. They want to destroy it. And they will if they're not stopped. And as I see the entire Al-Aqsa grounds, the entire compound empty for this long, I'm seeing all other parts of Palestine where Palestinians were denied entry for a very long time. Then the military comes in or whoever, and they do what they want with it. And it's likely they'll make it look like an accident, an Iranian missile or a fire or something. In fact, I have friends, Palestinian friends, from all over Palestine who now they can't go, but during particularly Ramadan, but in general, they would go there and spend the night to protect the place because settlers come in, young Zionists come in and try to destroy it. And they would sleep, they'd spend the night there, even when there was a lot of violence. But now nobody can enter. I'm sure the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to allow these young Zionist settlers to go in there and pray and do whatever they want before they allow Muslims. And when it's gone, it's going to be gone. That's it. Once it's gone, it's gone. A place like that, you can't, even if you rebuild it, it's not the same. This place has a history longer than all these other places and a significance and a beauty. And, I remember you always see teachers taking their Palestinian kids from the schools in Jerusalem going in there, having picnics, playing a little bit. It's a very beautiful, quiet, inspiring space. So people always say, oh, if they do this or if they do that, the entire Muslim world will rise. And they don't. They said they would do that if the United States recognizes Jerusalem as a capital. They didn't. They already took the Ibrahimi Mosque in Al-Khalil, which is, in terms of importance, is almost as important as Al-Aqsa. They took it. I mean, Muslims can still pray there, but the conditions are terrible, and the settlers basically own it, and the soldiers. So and I've been saying this for years, if people don't intervene, if countries don't intervene, not only will the genocide of the Palestinian people continue uninterrupted, but that gem of a place will be destroyed, and they don't care. They already have models of what they want to put instead. They have pictures. There's posters with this other thing there, which they call a temple. It's ridiculous, but instead of Al-Aqsa, they talk about it, they plan it, they do these tours, and I went on several of them just to see what these people are like. And so from Al-Buraq, there's a bridge that goes up to the hill, to Al-Aqsa, to the compound, and in the middle, there's kind of a waiting area, and there's a model of this thing they want to build there, a very, very detailed, very large model. If there's one thing about the Zionists that we know, is that they plan ahead, and they're usually light years ahead of us, who care for justice and so forth, and peace and liberation. So I think it's important to emphasize this. It's important for people to realize what we're talking about. Certainly the loss of human beings, as we've seen in Palestine, particularly over the last couple of years, is, there are no words to describe it, right? This Al-Aqsa destroyed, it's in the planning. There's no question about that either. And if the world doesn't intervene, the genocide will go uninterrupted, and that place, this iconic, its value is immeasurable, will be destroyed.
I believe you're absolutely 100% correct. And what I fear is exactly what you're saying, is that many Muslims won't do a thing about it. We watched hundreds of thousands of people die, and we didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, what are they going to do?
What are we going to do?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What are these? So I tell people, look, as constituents, as citizens, pressure your governments. Pressure your governments not to normalize. Pressure your governments to impose sanctions. It won't stop unless there are severe sanctions. Unless the Sixth Fleet is there. The Sixth Fleet is a fleet in the Mediterranean, imposing a no-fly zone on Gaza, enforcing a blockade, enforcing an arms embargo. Severe measures have to be taken in order for this to stop. And if they're not taken, it's not going to stop.
Shouldn't the Arab countries lead the way in this?
How?
But how do we expect Europeans who...
Because those are the only ones that have the power. What are Arab states going to do? We have masses of people marching on Palestine. That's not how it works. You can't cross all these different countries. The Europeans, the imperialists, the capitalists, they are the ones, the colonizers. And there is a growing sentiment in public opinion. Spain just downgraded their diplomatic relations. Sweden seems to be following, and others. But there has to be intense action by governments.
What do you think will get us there? What do you think will completely revolutionize the European American governments?
Pressure from below. That's the only thing that ever works.
Pressure from...
Not enough. Clearly not enough. As long as these governments... So what these governments do, they say, oh, we recognize the Palestinian state. What state? What are you recognizing? It's nonsense. You're not doing anything. You're not helping anyone. You need to recognize that the apartheid regime is illegal and must be dismantled, and then act to see it happen. And all trade, all diplomatic relations, boycott teams from the apartheid regime in the Olympics, and whatever, any areas, any arenas where different countries send their delegations, they should be barred. This will not stop. We haven't seen anything yet. And I say this with a hindsight of what's been going on in Gaza since 2023, until such action happens. And it won't happen unless we, as constituents, do everything we can to push our governments in that direction.
Is there a way for us to strategize? You mentioned how the Zionists are light years ahead in strategy than us. Well, what should we do when it comes to this to strategize? I know you're saying governments, but is there anything we can, like Netanyahu and his group were writing articles strategizing that 7-country war. Is there anything that we can do on that kind of level?
Of course we can. We just don't.
Think tanks.
Of course we can. We just don't. We don't need think tanks. Think tanks are a waste of time. They just write stuff. We need action. Now, we need to plan strategically, and that's really one of the reasons why we founded Palestine House of Freedom, and one of the things that we're doing is we need to think strategically. We need to understand what the objective is, what our limitations are, what their limitations are, and we need to work together strategically. And right now we're not. We're all over the place, and that's part of the problem. That we are all over the place, whereas they march to the tune, even with their differences, and there are a lot of differences between the Zionists and arguments, but they march to the tune when they're called. And we're not. We don't even have a tune. We're not even a movement, really, I think, in many ways. So that's starting to change. There are some politicians who get it. There are some attempts to get together. And again, we're hoping that this place will be that gathering place where all the different groups who do incredibly important work understand where we're going, and at least agree on where we're going. And you do this part, you do this part, you do this part, we do this part, and so on, which is all important. But there is no strategizing. There's no central command. There's no central, entity. South Africa, they had the South African Communist Party, they had the ANC, they worked together. Nothing happened. Most things policy was decided. Who does what was pretty much determined. I mean, it wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is, but revolutionary movements are far from perfect. But without that, we're just a bunch of little groups running around, So that's one of the reason we want to establish this place in a high-profile location with a flag and the name Palestine, with events, with a strategy we're building a curriculum as well that we're working on, a very serious curriculum using Palestinian sources. We do the events here focusing on Palestine, Palestinian culture, Palestinian history, Palestinian politics. People need to have the full picture. And then work towards a common goal. And right now, when you ask people, so when you say free Palestine, what do you mean? A lot of people are like, well, we're not sure, and that's the problem. We need to understand, and what we do is we're a conduit for Palestinian voices on the ground. We're a conduit for the voices of Palestinian leaders, grassroots leaders on the ground in Palestine. This is not me or some person's idea. These are established ideas. This is an established route, if you will, and an established understanding that there's an established objective: the liberation of Palestine from apartheid, dismantling apartheid, putting in actual path for the refugees to return, actual mechanisms, not using it as a slogan. You know what I mean? Creating a real democracy in Palestine with equal rights.
So usually, unfortunately, Muslims tend to be probably your highest form or income of human capital, right? As Palestine House of Freedom, I'm guessing, right? Where that's the majority of your base. What do you think, what frustrates you as someone who's not Muslim about how the Muslim community in America organizes, or the Palestinian community organizes, to get stuff like this done, to protect Al-Aqsa, to make sure that we can save Al-Aqsa?
Well, to be honest,
and Palestinians.
We have actually had great response from different organizations, different individuals in the Muslim community, the various Muslim communities, I should say, because you've got different groups, different people coming from different parts of the world, and everybody can do more. But I think in terms of organizations, what the Muslims are doing, particularly in the United States, is actually incredible. We can all do more. At the same time, my second book is Injustice, the story of the Holy Land Foundation. I don't know if you've heard of the Holy Land Foundation.
Yeah.
That book relates what happened to that excellent organization and to 5 of the finest people you'll ever meet, ending up in federal prison, 2 of them for 65 years. That was meant to scare the Muslim communities in this country, and it did, for good reason. That was the major blow, because the organization was well respected, very effective, even though it was small. I can't tell you how many people I meet around the country that remember that during Ramadan they would volunteer or send checks or do whatever for the Holy Land Foundation. So when the organization was designated a terrorist was designated as an organization providing material support for terrorism, which, by the way, there's no burden of proof. The government can just decide that you and I are now supporting terrorism. So, there's nothing, it's a very easy process. And these 5 excellent people, excellent men that everybody respected and loved deeply, and for good reason. So 3 of them ended their sentence. 2 of them got 15 years. They're both out of the country. Third one just ended his 20 years. And the other 2, Shukri Abu Bakr, Ghassan El-Ashi, got 65 years in prison. These are the finest people you'll ever meet. and there's campaigns for them and all kinds of stuff. But now, if you're a member of one of the Muslim communities, how would you not be scared? How are you not going to be scared for your kids? Hell, they're scared when they go to the masjid, to the mosque. And that was the intent. So once again, when I look at that community and I see what they do and the contributions they do make for Palestine, it's not easy, and still a lot of it gets done. So again, I think the onus is on people of privilege. Privileged people, white people, people like myself, privileged communities in this country and in the West. It's on them to make the change. It's on them to use the privilege to bring about the change, to end this colonial mentality, to end this capitalist mentality, to end this massacre, this genocide of people who are not white. I mean, if Iran was a Western country, things would be different, right? It's completely up to us as people who are privileged to push this as far as we can. And of course, everybody else does. I mean, there are plenty of people of color that participate in this struggle. But it's a threat for them. It's not a threat on us. It puts them in danger. It doesn't put us in danger.
Do you think we're getting close? Do you think we're getting close where white people are changing and going to act? And
A little bit, yeah. I mean, we've seen all these young Jewish organizations that are, calling out the genocide, and that are again now coming out in rejecting Zionism. So we see, I mean, there is a shift in this country, in the United States. There is certainly a shift in Europe, but it's not enough, obviously, because. And again, to be honest, I think the next election coming up in November and the one after that, the presidential elections, we're going to be some major changes in terms of the conversation on Palestine. It's going to be completely different than what we've seen so far. And the support for, the apartheid regime and so on. But at the same time, we need to provide them with a roadmap. We need to provide them with a strategy. We need to educate them so they know what is needed, because they don't know. I mean, members of Congress, they've got their constituents, they've got their priorities, they got, Palestine is maybe down the list somewhere, but they never get to it because they have constituents they have to take care of, and they have to get reelected every 2 years, so they have to raise, you know what I mean? So we need to push this forward. We need to make it front and center, which is again why we wanted to be in a high profile place. And of course, we're just a few blocks from the Capitol. We're on Pennsylvania Avenue. You can't miss it. It has to be in people's face. It has to be there all the time so that they know they can come and they can get the information, and they can get reliable information here. They can get Palestinian-centered information, as opposed to all these other experts and think tanks and what have you, as white people that are experts on the lives of people who are not white, which is the norm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very important, and I'm curious what your curriculum is about, because even when we saw Mamdani last week, who, I've enjoyed seeing as a mayor of New York. I think he's a great guy, and I think he's a great mayor, but his reaction to his wife's tweet, for example, it didn't seem like he knew how to respond correctly. Like many people said, he threw his wife under the bus and condemned her tweet, even though the tweet she liked or reposted, whatever it was.
No, she provided the art for a book by Susan Abu Hawa. Susan Abu Hawa was a great Palestinian writer, and I know her, she's a friend, is hated by the Zionists. And so Mamdani's wife, who's an artist, a professional artist, provided the art for the book. That's what this is about. And, they said that, Susan Abu Hawa called the Jews this and called the Jews that. It's complete nonsense. She's referring to these horrible acts committed by the way, Jews who are Zionists, in the military and in the apartheid Zionist space. And she described them in ways that I feel are completely appropriate. And I'm sure.
And you're Jewish. You're of Jewish background.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's got nothing to do with Judaism. I mean, if a Jew is a criminal, he's a criminal. I don't care if he's Jewish or not. If he's a criminal, he needs to go to jail, right? We're not going to open all the prisons and let the Jews out because they're Jews, right? It's a ridiculous kind of, paradigm. So I don't know what he was asked. I didn't look at it too much. It's very easy to attack somebody like that, and I'm like, whatever. But the context is important, because what she did, she provided art. I don't think they even know each other. From what I understand, they don't even know each other. It was through a publisher and an agent. I mean, it was all very formal. Now, anti-Semitism is obviously a form of racism, right? It's racism directed at Jews. It's not this new definition that the Zionists created, which is called the IHRA definition, which everybody suddenly decided to adopt. That is nonsense. Anti-Semitism, like other forms of, I don't think it's an elevated form of racism. It's racism like everything, like any other form of racism, and it should be, should be zero tolerance for it. Zionism, on the other hand, is racism, is white supremacy, is violent,
is anti-Semitism.
Is anti-Semitic. When you read what the early Zionists said about the Jewish communities in Europe, the traditional kind of Jews, traditional religious Jews, you will not believe what they said about their own people. They would say, basically, their point was a Zionist is the opposite of what a Jew is. And I'm quoting, you know. So what's a Zionist? Because you're talking to Jewish people, right? They had these crazy impressions of I don't know, Greek gods or something. I don't know. But the point is that it belongs in the same column as all other forms of racism that should not be tolerated.
And there's little whispers in the history books that the Zionists funded Hitler's campaign against the Jews to
They didn't
scare
fund
them.
it, but when the Zionists had an opportunities in some cases to deal with Hitler in order to save Jews. There's a famous saying by David Ben-Gurion, who was the first Israeli prime minister. He said, if I had to choose between no Holocaust and no Israel, or Holocaust and the creation of Israel, I would choose the latter.
Wow.
That's the kind of mindset the Zionists have.
Yeah.
And when very few Holocaust survivors actually went to what became Israel, and they were treated with contempt.
Really?
Yeah.
Holocaust survivors in Israel treated with contempt.
Yes.
Why?
Because they were not masculine and militaristic and stuff like that.
They were a stain on the strong view of the Jewish chosen.
Exactly. That's why so many of them that did go ended up leaving.
Oh, interesting.
So, Zionism is a terrible thing. There should be no tolerance for Zionism. And again, I don't know if you saw, but Susan Abulhawa put out an excellent video in response to that.
No, I did not.
Yeah, an excellent video in response to that.
I'll be sure to put it
I don't know. From the clip I saw, it doesn't sound like he was attacking her. It sounds like he was attacking the idea of using that terminology against Jews.
I see.
So, you got to put things in perspective. But her video, she put out a pretty long video on social media addressing this. And she did it in a very thoughtful and honest way. And I applaud her for that.
Every soul was created with purpose, and every believer was given a chance to act. You may not see it now, but your giving could be someone's lifeline, a child's next meal, a widow's rent, a family's clean water. Humanity believes this ummah was made to carry each other. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever helps ease one in difficulty, Allah will make it easy for him in this world and the hereafter. That's why humanity was built, to bring back the spirit of rahmah, of mercy, that defined this ummah from the very beginning. Not just aid, but solutions. Solar-powered water systems, direct zakah funds delivered to the hands of those who need it, orphans given a chance to learn, to grow, and lead. This is not your average nonprofit. They removed the red tape. They've reimagined charity from the ground up with transparency, trust, and ihsan. Humanity is a registered US and Canadian charity with a 100% zakah policy. They work with trusted partners, including UN agencies, to ensure your donation is safe, accountable, and impactful. But more than that, they are a movement, a global wave of believers who see suffering and say, I will do something. So if you believe in mercy, if you believe in change, if you want your sadaqah and zakat to leave a mark on the world, this is your moment. And this is humanity. Go to wearehumanity.org and give today and make your mark.
Do you think that Donald Trump has abandoned the America First campaign?
I don't think Donald Trump has any campaign other than Donald Trump first. He just goes, look at him. America first? Look at everything he's done and show me one thing that put the people who live in the United States first. Show me one thing that he's done that has prioritized the well-being of people in this country over his own profit. Show me one thing.
Actually, I don't know.
I don't think there is one.
No.
I don't think there is one. It's all about him and his bottom line and lining up his pockets. That's the only thing. He's using all these slogans, because that's what he does. But he's never had anybody first. It's him first.
You see Professor Zhang's, that Asian professor that's come out and has all these predictions. He had 3 predictions so far. 2 of them are right. He stands in front of that board.
Oh, yeah.
You saw how he said that Jared Kushner's the new Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, I saw that.
What do you think of that?
I don't know. The whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, in a way, it's part of white supremacy. It's been part of white supremacy going back in this country, certainly hundreds of years. What did the first colonizers do? They took little native girls and raped them and gave them all kinds of horrible diseases. What did they do with slaves? What did Thomas Jefferson do? Thomas Jefferson, his Monticello is not far from here. He was a pedophile and a rapist. And his farm, which is again right here in Virginia, he had single men working there, and they had free access to these young slave women, and the babies remained as slaves. In other words, it benefited his pocket.
Wow.
So basically, he had a farm for slaves. And he himself, there's a story of his whatever she was, 14-year-old or whatever. And when you go to Monticello, they say, well, we don't know, maybe it was consensual. So Jeffrey Epstein it's an integral part of white supremacist culture and colonial culture. In this country, for sure. Other countries too, but in this country, for sure. From the very beginning, people are like shocked. Oh my God, what do you expect? People of power abusing their power and using helpless victims for their pleasure. What's new? And you talked about the Roman Empire. What's new? There's nothing new about this.
Do you think the greatest threat to American security right now is Greater Israel?
It doesn't have to be greater. It doesn't have to be Greater Israel, but certainly the alliance between the Zionist regime and the United States has not benefited the United States one bit. It only exists because it benefited weapons manufacturers, but it hasn't benefited the United States one bit. Iraq, the so-called war on terror, the war on Islam, the war on Arabs. None of this, and it's all stems from this really just nasty, unholy alliance with this other white supremacist regime, which is the Zionist regime in Palestine.
Miko Peled, that's all the questions that I have for you. Do you have any final thoughts before we head off?
Fight for Palestine. This is the fight of our lifetime. We are all going to be judged. All of us, by our children, our grandchildren. They're going to ask us, where were you? What did you do? And so make sure you do something every day. Every day, find your niche and find a way to support the Palestinian cause.
Mr. Miko Peled, founder and president of Palestine House of Freedom, thank you so much for joining the Unsaudi podcast. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And if you guys would like to donate or check out or support or come visit Palestine House of Freedom, you can go on PalestineHouseOfFreedom.org. And once again, thank you guys for listening to the Unsaudi podcast. Assalamu alaikum.
Every day, find your niche and find a way to support the Palestinian cause.
Mr. Miko Peled, founder and president of Palestine House of Freedom, thank you so much for joining the Unsaudi podcast. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And if you guys would like to donate or check out or support or come visit Palestine House of Freedom, you can go on PalestineHouseOfFreedom.org. And once again, thank you guys for listening to the Unsaudi podcast. Assalamu alaikum.
The power of visualization. See it, believe it, achieve it. Close your eyes. Not to escape the world, but to see it as it could be. Because the truth is that everything you can hold in your hands began first in the mind of someone who refused to let go of their vision. Steel empires, global movements, technological revolutions, every towering skyscraper that defies gravity, once lived as a faint flicker in the soul of a dreamer. What the world called unrealistic, they called inevitable. And so I ask you now, what do you see when you close your eyes? Not what the world handed you, not the limits you were taught. What do you see when the noise dies down and your soul speaks? Because that is where your life begins. Not in the circumstances, not in the conditions, but in the clarity of a vision so vivid it burns into your reality like sunlight through glass. Visualization is not fantasy. It's not wishful thinking. It's the discipline of belief in motion. It's the blueprint of champions, the language of every soul who ever changed the course of history. Walt Disney stood in swampland and saw a kingdom. Edison saw light in the dark. Lincoln saw united people through the blood of civil war. They weren't hallucinating. They were seeing with a deeper eye. And you have that same power. But here's the tragedy. Most people never use it. They don't see their future. They rehearse their past. They replay failures. They imagine rejection. They visualize worst-case scenarios and call it realism. But the subconscious doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. It simply obeys. So, when you see defeat, you train for it. You become the architect of your own limitation. But when you see greatness, vividly, consistently, with purpose and emotion, you summon forces far beyond your conscious comprehension. You activate a force called definiteness of purpose, the power of a mind made up, the moment when a wish becomes a will. And will, backed by vision, is an unstoppable force. Think about it. The Wright brothers had no funding, no credentials, no applause, but they had vision. They saw flight while the world mocked the sky. They obsessed, they bled, they failed forward, and they saw it again, again, and again, until wings took shape and gravity bowed its head. This is not about positive thinking. This is about mental blueprints. Visualization is how we instruct the universe. You do not get what you want. You get what you are prepared to receive, and preparation begins in the mind. You see, the mind is a garden. Whatever you plant grows. Doubt, it'll flourish. Vision, it'll expand. But the soil doesn't care what you plant, it just grows it. That's the terrifying beauty of thought. So, be careful what you imagine, because your imagination is your construction site. And here's where the shift happens. You must not only see the outcome, you must live it, walk in it, talk in it, think as if it's already done. Because the subconscious does not follow commands, it follows patterns. The more often you visualize your success with emotion, detail, and faith, the more your nervous system calibrates to act accordingly. Athletes do it, Navy SEALs do it. World-class performers do it. They rehearse every detail of their victory before they step onto the battlefield. Because the body follows the mind, not the other way around. If you wake up and only see the problems, guess what multiplies? Problems. But if you rise and see your goals, feel your progress, taste your future like it's already here, you tap into a deeper source. Energy surges, doubt dissolves, your actions sharpen, you start aligning with your destiny, not your fears. And now let's talk about belief. Because visualization without belief is a painting without color. Belief gives your vision substance. And belief, like vision, is a choice. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That wasn't clever wordplay. It was law, the law of self-concept. You will never outperform your belief about who you are. So here's the test. Can you see yourself there? Before the world puts you there? Can you speak as the person you're becoming? Act as the person you dream to be? And believe it even when your bank account, your circumstances, your history scream the opposite? That is the price of greatness, to believe not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. When Carnegie built his steel empire, he was a poor immigrant with no connections. But in his mind, he was already a titan. He saw the deals before they were signed. He walked into rooms he had yet to be invited into, and eventually the world caught up to his inner reality. You must do the same. You must become a visionary, not just in career, but in identity. Who are you becoming? What does that version of you look like? What do they say? Think, do, tolerate, and pursue. Visualize it, write it, speak it, feel it. That is how you make the invisible real. But remember, vision alone is not enough. You must move. You must take the mental image and give it breath. Turn clarity into commitment. Turn seeing into becoming. That is where most stop. They dream, but they don't do. And vision without action is the mirage that destroys the soul. It teases what could be, but delivers nothing. But when vision and action collide, the world bends, and it starts with clarity. You cannot build what you haven't defined. Vague goals produce vague results. The mind needs specifics. It needs targets. It needs details. Not I want success, but I will earn $10,000 a month by launching this business, serving these people, solving this problem. Not I want to be fit, but I will weigh this much, lift this much, run this far by this date. That's how you speak to the subconscious. Define it, design it, then live it mentally every single day. Because repetition is the sculptor of destiny. You will not become what you visualize once. You will become what you visualize consistently, daily, obsessively, until your brain starts adjusting your behaviors, your standards, your environment to match that inner image. That's not magic. That's biology. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information, starts seeking out opportunities, people, and ideas that align with what you've been feeding it. It's like tuning a radio. If you're tuned to scarcity, you'll miss abundance. But if you tune into vision, you'll start seeing paths that were invisible before, because they were always there. You just weren't ready to see them. Clarity feeds belief, and belief fuels discipline. Because once you see it clearly enough and believe it deeply enough, the work stops feeling optional. It becomes sacred. Discipline is not about punishment. It's about alignment. It's what happens when your vision burns so hot inside you that mediocrity becomes unbearable. when you've rehearsed the feeling of victory so vividly, so often, that any action not moving you toward it feels like betrayal. You don't need motivation when you have alignment. You need only to remember what you saw in silence, in solitude, in those private moments where your future called to you. That's why most people never follow through. They don't forget how to act. They forget what they saw. They lose the image. The dream fades into fog. And in the absence of vision, the body returns to comfort. But not you. You will hold that image like a torch in the dark. You will revisit it when the world tells you to quit. You will see it in the morning before you rise. You will taste it at night before you sleep. You'll protect that vision from doubt like a lion guarding its cubs, because that vision is your life waiting to be claimed. Discipline isn't about grinding blindly. It's about moving deliberately. Every rep, every step, every conversation becomes a brick in the structure you've already seen. That's why it matters. That's why every early morning, every rejection, every sacrifice is worth it. Because you've already been there, see, in your mind. You've seen the outcome. You're just aligning your body to match what your spirit already knows. And from discipline comes momentum. See, the first actions are the hardest. Not because they're difficult, but because they defy your current identity. You're shifting who you are, and identity resists change. The ego clings to the familiar. But the moment you take that first bold step, something begins to shift. You send a message, not to the world, but to yourself. You say, "This is who I am now." And the world listens, not immediately, not all at once. But the universe rewards those who live in integrity with their vision. Not those who wish, not those who talk, but those who embody the future they've seen. That's why action must be paired with emotional intensity. Visualization without feeling is hollow. But when you inject emotion into your mental rehearsal, you engage the whole nervous system. You create real memory, and real memory leads to real results. This is why gratitude is a force multiplier. Gratitude is more than polite reflection. It is fuel. When you feel deep gratitude for a future outcome, before it happens, you're signaling belief on the highest level. You're saying, "I trust this so fully that I'm already thankful." That's the energy that bends reality. Einstein once said there are only two ways to live: as if nothing is a miracle, or as if everything is. Choose the second. Because when you are grateful in advance, you are not begging for your dream. You are preparing for it. You are declaring its arrival. And here's the paradox. Gratitude brings hunger. Not the kind of hunger that comes from lack, but the kind that comes from love. Love for the vision, love for the journey, love for what you're becoming. That kind of hunger is insatiable. It wakes you up early. It keeps you up late. It makes discomfort irrelevant. And that hunger, that inner fire, leads to resilience, because no matter how vivid your vision, life will test you. You will be challenged. You will face delays, failures, ridicule. The path will bend. The terrain will change. But the vision must remain, because the only people who succeed are not the ones who never fail. They're the ones who refuse to quit on the image they've seen. When Thomas Edison was asked how it felt to fail 1,000 times, he replied, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." That's how visionaries think. They don't see failure as the opposite of success. They see it as part of it. They understand that the journey will sculpt them, that setbacks are feedback, that pain is part of the process, and the only way to survive it is to see beyond it. You have to be able to look past the storm and see the shore, to look past the darkness and see the dawn. Because if you can't see it, you can't stand it. You will buckle. You will break. But if you can hold the image, if you can see the destination while others only see the detour, you become unstoppable. That's the essence of resilience. Not just to endure, but to persist with purpose. To keep walking because your vision won't let you stop. And resilience births adaptability. Because sometimes the dream stays the same, but the path must evolve. And if you're too attached to how it's supposed to happen, you'll miss why it must. Flexibility is not weakness, it's wisdom. The river doesn't stop when it meets a rock, and it flows around it. So must you. Your vision is not a fixed GPS route. It's a destination. And the route is revealed as you walk. Doors appear when you move. Help arrives when you commit. Opportunities surface when your energy shifts. But you must be in motion You must be teachable, willing to learn, willing to adjust, willing to grow, because who you are now cannot handle what your future requires. You must become the version of yourself that can. And that requires learning. Lifelong, deliberate, humble learning. The greatest visionaries were also the greatest students. They read. They asked questions. They surrounded themselves with mentors. Carnegie had his library. Lincoln taught himself law. Decades have been spent interviewing giants to uncover the laws of success. They didn't rely on talent, they relied on growth, and growth requires humility. To admit what you don't know, to seek answers, to ask better questions, to study the craft of becoming. You cannot visualize a grand future and remain ignorant in the present. The mind must be fed. Your skills must be sharpened. Your perspective must expand. Because as your vision grows, so must your capacity. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are prepared for. And preparation is the ultimate act of faith. It says, I'm not just hoping. I'm ready. And when the student is ready, the teacher appears in the form of people, experiences, challenges, and opportunities that shape you for the very future you saw. But no matter how vivid the vision, no matter how disciplined the mind, there is one more ingredient that separates the dreamers from the doers: courage. Because the moment you begin to walk toward your vision, resistance will rise, not just from the world, but from within. Fear will whisper, what if you fail? Doubt will ask, who do you think you are? And comfort will seduce. Stay here. Stay safe. Don't reach. Don't risk. But listen closely. That resistance is not your enemy. It's a signal that you're moving in the right direction. You are nearing the edge of your current self and pressing into the next. And only the courageous cross that line. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. That your vision, the one you've seen, felt, lived in your heart, is worth the discomfort, worth the risk, worth the climb. Every visionary you admire had to make that decision. Martin Luther King Jr. saw a world of equality. He visualized it, preached it, moved in it. Long before it existed, he lived inside it. And that vision gave him the courage to walk through fire because he believed in what was yet unseen. And that's your call too, to act not from what is, but from what could be. To stop letting the external dictate the internal. To stop letting statistics, opinions, history, or limitations write your story. You hold the pen. You own the narrative. And the story you write in your mind becomes the life you live in the world. But only if you believe it long enough to see it through. Most give up too soon, not because the dream was impossible, but because they stopped looking at it. They let the world blur their inner vision. They let failure become their lens. And slowly they forgot what it looked like. Don't let that happen. Guard your vision like it's oxygen, because it is. It will feed your steps when you're tired. It will lift your eyes when you're low. It will remind you every day who you are and what you're here to do. You were not born to blend in. You were not born to survive, cope, or settle. You were born to create. And creation begins in the unseen. Before the skyscraper, the blueprint, before the speech, the thought, before the masterpiece, the vision. So go there, daily, vividly, with feeling, with faith. Stand in the halls of your dream. Walk the floor. Touch the walls. Hear the echoes of your own greatness reflected back to you. Make it real before it is. And then return to this world and build it, brick by brick, breath by breath. Act as if it were already yours. Speak as if it has already come to pass. And when doubt knocks, show it the door. It cannot survive in a mind saturated with vision, because here's the secret. The world doesn't respond to what's real. It responds to what's believed. A person with a vision and the courage to move toward it is more powerful than 1,000 skeptics standing still. Because belief backed by vision becomes a magnet. And that magnet pulls people, resources, opportunities, and outcomes into alignment. This is the power of visualization. It's not a trick. It's not a secret. It's a law. And like all laws, it doesn't care if you understand it. It just works. For you or against you, consciously or unconsciously. So now the question becomes, will you use it? Will you dare to dream so vividly, so repeatedly, so passionately that it begins to shape not just your thoughts, but your actions, your habits, your standards, your life? Because the moment you do, the world begins to bend. People notice something different in your voice. And opportunities seem to find you. Confidence grows. where there was once doubt. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop shrinking for approval. You stop hiding from the weight of your potential. You begin to own it. And not just for your own sake, but for everyone watching, because your vision is never just about you. It's about the people who will rise because you rose, the family that will be transformed, the legacy that will be left, the lives that will be changed. Not because you were perfect, but because you had the courage to believe in something no one else could see, until you showed them. That is the responsibility of a visionary. To see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. And to walk that road every day until what was once a whisper in your heart becomes a thunder in the world. So let this be your reminder. You have the gift, the vision, the inner eye, the fire. See it, believe it, and do not stop until you achieve it, because one day you will look back and you won't remember every step. You won't remember every early morning, every late night, every small sacrifice. You'll remember a feeling, the moment when it clicked, when what you once imagined, impossible, distant, invisible, became your reality. You'll walk into a room you once dreamed of, shake hands with someone you once admired from afar, sign a deal, speak on a stage, stand in front of a crowd, and your mind will whisper, I've been here before, because you have. You saw it first. Before anyone else believed, you believed. Before it made sense, you saw it clearly. Before it showed up on a schedule or a check or a screen, it lived inside you. And no one could take it, no one could see it, no one could validate it until you brought it to life. That is the mark of greatness. To carry a vision so powerful that it withstands rejection, delays, embarrassment, failure, and still lives. To keep walking, even when the road is dark, because the light inside you is brighter than the one outside. To act with conviction in a world addicted to doubt. To rise without applause. To persist without praise. To hold fast when others fold. Because vision is not given to the strongest, the richest, or the loudest. It's given to the willing. Those who choose to listen, to imagine, to believe again and again until their inner world forces the outer world to respond. That's what Edison did, what Disney did, what Carnegie and Ford and Lincoln did. They lived inside their dream until it became inescapable. They walked through doubt, through failure, through bankruptcy, through betrayal. And they still saw the vision. You can do the same. Right now, you have that same spark, that same ability, that same mental canvas on which anything can be painted. But you must decide to stop consuming the lives of others and start creating your own.
Unchecked power does not just reveal character, it rewires it. The Winner Effect by Ian H. Robertson. Audiobook summary and review by StoryShots. Every victory floods your brain with testosterone and dopamine, sharpening your focus, boosting your confidence, and priming you to win again. But this same neurochemical cascade can spiral into addiction, arrogance, and catastrophic judgment. That is the thesis of The Winner Effect, The Neuroscience of Success and Failure by Ian H. Robertson. Some people ride success to the top, while others crash spectacularly once they get there. The difference is not talent, it is brain chemistry shaped by accumulated results. Your brain rewires after every win. Winning is not just a psychological boost, it is a biological event. When you succeed at anything, your brain releases dopamine and testosterone. Dopamine signals, "This worked," and encodes the strategy you just used, so you repeat it. Testosterone increases your confidence, your willingness to take risks, and your tolerance for competitive pressure. Research on city traders shows that their testosterone levels tends to be higher on days when they make above-average profits, suggesting a link between hormonal state and financial performance rather than a guaranteed boost after each individual winning deal. Each win makes the next win more likely because your brain is literally different after the victory than it was before. The effect compounds. Repeated wins do not just add confidence, they multiply it. But here is what most people miss. The neurochemical boost does not care whether your win was earned through skill or luck. Your brain cannot tell the difference. A weak opponent beaten easily triggers the same cascade as a hard-fought victory against a stronger rival. This is why early advantages snowball. Small wins create brain changes that make bigger wins more accessible. Losing triggers the opposite cascade. If winning rewires you for more success, losing rewires you for more failure. When you lose, testosterone drops and cortisol spikes. Cortisol narrows your focus, amplifies perceived threats, and reduces your willingness to take risks. Your brain interprets the loss as evidence that your approach failed, so it encodes caution. Skilled competitors react more strongly to testosterone boosts and less to cortisol spikes, which is why experienced winners handle pressure better than novices. Unskilled competitors do the opposite. They react weakly to wins and strongly to losses, trapping them in a cycle where each defeat makes the next one more likely. The gap between winners and losers is not talent. It is brain chemistry shaped by accumulated results. So, what does this mean for you today? If you are stuck in a losing streak at work, in relationships, or in any competitive domain, your brain is actively working against you. The cortisol response is real, and it is making you worse at the very thing you need to improve. Power corrupts by shutting down empathy. Power does not just change how you perform, it changes how you see other people. When you gain status, your brain filters differently. You become better at creative thinking, decision-making, and execution because power frees cognitive resources previously spent managing social threats. But the same neurological shift that makes you more effective also makes you less empathetic. Powerful people begin to view others through a lens of utility. They objectify. They stop listening to corrective feedback because their dopamine-flooded brains interpret dissent as noise, not signal. Leaders who rise through competence often fall through arrogance. The confidence that helped them win tips into overconfidence. The decisiveness that earned them authority tips into impulsivity. Power does not corrupt by making you evil. It corrupts by making you deaf. If you know someone navigating leadership, competition, or any high-stakes environment, send them this summary. Final summary. This summary of The Winner Effect by Ian H. Robertson connects 3 insights into one argument. Winning changes your brain chemistry in ways that make future wins more likely. Losing triggers the opposite neurochemical response that traps you in failure. And unchecked power corrupts judgment by shutting down empathy and inflating confidence beyond competence. But the diagnosis is only the start. Robertson explores how to harness the winner effect without falling into its traps, why Oscar winners live 4 years longer than nominees, what the Ben Franklin effect reveals about power dynamics, and how to build resilience against the loser effect when setbacks hit. You will also learn the Goldilocks principle for setting goals that maximize motivation without triggering self-sabotage. We are putting together the full summary of The Winner Effect right now, with a visual infographic and animated video. Follow the book in the Story Shots app to get it the moment it is ready.
Why most people fail at success and how you can avoid it. Most people don't fail at success because they're incapable. They fail because they never define success in the first place. They drift through life chasing shadows, titles, money, applause, without ever asking themselves one crucial question. What does success mean to me? Not to my parents, not to society, not to the crowd, to me. And that's where it begins, with a question. A burning question that splits the soul wide open and demands honesty. Are you living someone else's dream? Or are you building your own? Most will never ask. They'll trade their ambition for approval. They'll give away their destiny one compromise at a time. And they'll wake up one day wondering why they feel hollow after doing everything they were supposed to do. But success isn't a checklist. It isn't a trophy. It's not found in a corner office or on a stage. It is forged in the fire of clarity and conviction. Andrew Carnegie said it best. The men who have succeeded are men who have chosen one line and stuck to it. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be rich to begin. You don't need the approval of the world. You need clarity. Because clarity is power. Clarity is what turned a boy named Edison, half-deaf and labeled uneducable, into a man who lit the world. He had a vision so clear, so alive, that failure didn't stop him. 10,000 failed experiments weren't failures to him. They were steps. That's where most people fall. Not from lack of intelligence, not from lack of talent, but from lack of direction. They scatter their energy like leaves in the wind. They want everything. And in chasing everything, they commit to nothing. And you cannot rise without commitment. Success demands sacrifice. It demands obsession. It demands that you cut away the noise, the distractions, the empty promises of comfort, and get deadly serious about where you're going. But belief, belief is the engine. Without belief, clarity is a dream without legs. Belief is what turns vision into motion. Belief is what drove a poor, awkward boy named Abraham Lincoln to teach himself law by candlelight in a cabin. Because he believed his life could mean something more. And that belief carried him through loss, through ridicule, through failure after failure, until he stood tall as one of history's most immortal figures. Most people fail at success because they let doubt take root. They water it daily with fear, feed it with comparison, and then wonder why their dreams don't grow. You cannot build a future on a foundation of doubt. You must choose belief. Not the kind that whispers, but the kind that roars. The kind that doesn't need evidence because it is the evidence. It becomes a compass. The inner fire. The unseen current that pulls you through the storm. But belief alone is not enough. It must be paired with vision. Vision is not just what you see with your eyes. Vision is what you feel in your bones. Disney had it.